Well, I've been extremely disturbed about how much pain, suffering, and death has occurred on this planet for the last, 2 billion years? It seems strange that you're disturbed about a little bit of antinatalism that's become accessible on the internet, given that I myself only have 275 or so subscribers. It's, Antinatalism is currently a complete taboo subject in society. So I don't understand why it disturbs you so. Well, that might be the arguing point of many antinatalists, but I argue from the stance that if you don't create any children, you can't deprive them of any happiness, and you're not increasing the amount of people on this planet who will have to suffer and die needlessly. How much pain and suffering is there going on the planet Jupiter? How much pain and suffering is now going on the planet Earth? How many species are now extinct as a result of mankind's behavior? How many of those extinctions were motivated by compassionate genocide as opposed to malicious genocide? So if you're suffering because of any arbitrary reason, that discounts you from promoting antinatalism. I mean, that's like saying that if you belong to a member of an ethnic minority, then you're not entitled to speak out against racism. And another point is, have you looked at divorce rates in your country? The idea of having a lifelong compatible partner is often a pipe dream for many millions and millions of people all across the world. So the implication here is that if somebody doesn't have the time to have a child but would like to have a child, then they would still have a child if the circumstances allowed. So there's a direct implication here that antinatalists that fall into this category are being hypocritical. Now, let me tell you some things about hypocrisy. One surprising truth about hypocrisy is its irrelevance. The fact that someone is a hypocrite does not mean that his or her position on an issue is false. Environmentalists who litter do not, by doing so, disprove the claims of environmentalism. Politicians who publicly oppose illegal immigration but privately employ illegal immigrants do not thereby prove that contesting illegal immigration is wrong. Allegations of hypocrisy are treacherous because they can function as argumentative diversions, drawing our attention away from the task of assessing the strength of a position and toward the character of the position's advocate. Such accusations trigger emotional reflexes that dominate more rational thought patterns, and it is precisely in the difficult and important case, such as antinatalism, that our reflexes are most often inadequate. Thus, listeners should temper such knee-jerk reactions towards the messenger and instead independently consider the validity of the message itself. Well, if that is the case, then why even bring up the issues of the motivation behind antinatalism. I think it's a very clever ploy that you've done here. You've quoted somebody else in an attempt to tarnish antinatalists and the movement of antinatalism in general without actually getting your own hands dirty. You've just quoted somebody who's making an inflammatory comment, and but you're divorcing yourself from it, but you're still putting that meme forward. You're still increasing the memes that antinatalism is motivated by less than honourable reasons. So you love life and you want to get the most out of it as possible, and this involves having as much freedom as you can, which includes procreating if you want to. So this is an argument from self-interest. And then you quote people who have accused antinatalists of arguing antinatalism for self-interested reasons. So it just completely collapses, and we should focus on the actual arguments. Yes, there's so much that needs doing. There's the whole business of um, reducing our deprivation states and those of others. But that's all there is. That's all there is there. We're just a DNA reproducing chemical manifestation of a life force, if you like, and that is it. There's no winning crossing line to finish here. All we're doing is we're delaying our inevitable extinction and creating more people who will suffer and die in the future. I don't find this whole human enterprise of just delaying the inevitable honourable or purposeful at all. It's an abomination. I have a higher notion of what a genuine purpose is than you do. Your purpose is of just trying to stretch out this pointless and futile and absurd human endeavour unsatisfactory, and I don't appreciate being brought into this world by people such as yourself who take no accountability for their reckless procreative decisions. Okay, so if you don't think that life is fundamentally pointless and absurd, then how can you guarantee that the child you create or the children that other people create will also see a point and a purpose to it all? I mean, life is a process when you get from point A to point A. You don't exist, then you're created, you find yourself, much to your astonishment, on a planet, and then you die. So you go back from the non-existence from whence you came. I mean, getting from point A to point A seems kind of redundant and pointless to me. It's like, just stay in point A. This, this is, I don't find your reasoning and logic satisfactory here. So why do you feel you have the right to create people when you know there are people like myself who can look at the live game objectively and come to the realization that the existentialists were completely validated with what they said when they said that life is absurd. One must imagine Sisyphus happy. Well, I'm afraid we can't all play make-believe games and imagine something that is not the case. We're not just talking about you, we're talking about the billions and billions and billions of of human beings who will be born in the future in a redundant game. Point A to point A. Redundant. Yeah, it's preposterous, isn't it, not to do something because there's a risk associated with that act. I mean, how stupid it is that worldwide drink driving is illegal, just because there's a risk that some people might be grievously injured or killed. I mean, that's just ridiculous, just because there's a risk. I mean, that's one argument, but the second argument is, I mean, this is just such simplistic logic and evaluation from you. I mean, it's not even logic, it's Mickey Mouse logic. Existing isn't something you either like or you don't like. I mean, life is a mixed bag. There are going to be some things that you don't like. I mean, I'm pretty confident that you're not going to enjoy slowly dying in a hospital bed. So you don't just say, I like existing. You should say, I like some things about existing, and I don't like other things about existing. I mean, that's a fair, open-minded, broad-minded, intelligent, detailed way of regarding life. And the fact remains that you wouldn't have been deprived of anything you've had up to this date, and you wouldn't have the prospect that you do now of dying at an unknown point in the future in a likely distressing and uncomfortable way. So regardless of your irrational subjective appraisal of the merits of coming into existence, you've still been unnecessarily harmed. Oh, I see. You don't have a reptilian brain. You don't have a brain stem. The part of the brain that is involved in our survival instinct and that governs behavior at an unconscious level that's often impervious to the rational mind. I see. Yes. Suicide is so easy to do. If you don't like life, then you just commit suicide. I mean, you wouldn't even think about being motivated for any altruistic, compassionate, empathetic reasons to persist in living. I mean, if you didn't personally like life, then you can just end it all. It doesn't matter about the people who are left behind, because everybody needs to be completely self-interested and not look at the ramifications their premature death would have on other people around them. I like Coca-Cola. I don't have any more Coca-Cola in the fridge, so I need to go to a shop and buy some Coca-Cola. Now, the shop needs to purchase its Coca-Cola from a factory, and the shopkeeper, the shop staff, will tell the factory to make more Coca-Cola. Now, is it a bit dodgy to talk about the fact that the shop doesn't currently have any Coca-Cola? No, it makes perfect sense. People create Coca-Cola, and that has ramifications for the future. If you make Coca-Cola now, then there will be more Coca-Cola in the future. In a similar vein, if you create more children, then there will be more suffering and dying people on this planet in the future. Oh, the horror of never having been born. This poor inanimate object that doesn't have sentience. I just mourn for all these inanimate objects that don't manifest sentience around me. Poor Jupiter. There's no life or sentience on Jupiter. I just lose so many hours of sleep mourning over all that absence of sentience. Correlation does not imply causation. Have you read Michio Kaku's Physics of the Impossible? Do you know the technologies that will become, or likely will become, available in the next 1 or 200 years? Nanotechnology, invisibility, teleportation, phasers, artificial intelligence, man-made created viruses. There's a lull in the storm. Do you think you talk about progress, do you think we're just going to move forward gracefully without a hitch from now on in? No, it's all going to go pear-shaped. You just have to be a deluded optimist to think otherwise. Two points. Just because we've dealt with the Black Death and polio and other diseases, it doesn't mean that that's all behind us. You think, oh, it's all behind us now, that was in the past. But as I mentioned earlier, man-made viruses, the threat is never over as long as the human race is on this planet. And you talk about a plague potentially decimating an entire population of a continent. Even through that barbarity and the horrible suffering, people were still having babies. The human race seems able to acclimatize itself to any horror. The justification for creating life on the standard of living that people typically experience is a red herring, because throughout history, regardless of the standard of life, people just continue to procreate. They'll just procreate through anything. So it's not about the standard of life. It's the risks are they're not even risks. The human race is going to go extinct. I hope you can appreciate that. Birth rates are going to drop drastically anyway, or dramatically. It will drop to zero when the human race becomes extinct. Something that you forgot to mention in your video. Oh, I see. The reason why you think people should have children is because animals have been eating animals for hundreds of millions of years. Silly me. It's just, people just are not very transparent about that reason for them wanting to have children. So I was misled there, I'm sorry. Well, the future is going to go sour anyway, if you regard human extinction as a sour event. I mean, that's an inevitability. But I don't think encouraging people not to procreate due to ethical reasons is going to diminish the existential risks that the human race is going to face in the next 1 or 2 or 300 years. In fact, I actually think that if you take logical, rational people who don't want to create suffering out of the gene pool, or you encourage them not to breed, then there's a selective pressure that's made more pronounced because the meme is actually out there, then I think the actual existential risk to mankind increases. So I don't see my promoting antinatalism as incompatible with that possible or arguably probable eventuality.